You've heard the name, right? Sigmund Freud. It just conjures up these images, the therapist's couch, talking about your dreams, all the hidden corners of our minds. We call him the father of psychoanalysis, and he totally changed how we think about ourselves. But what if the foundation of his whole revolutionary science wasn't exactly his to begin with?
So let me just ask you something. When you hear the phrase, the unconscious mind, who's the first person that pops into your head? It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, the answer everyone gives is, of course, Sigmund Freud. We're all taught that he was this pioneering medical doctor, kind of like a scientific explorer mapping a new continent. And through his careful clinical observations of patients, he was the one who uncovered the secret world inside of us. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? Not even close. The idea of a powerful, hidden part of our mind was actually buzzing around long before Freud ever saw his first patient. And it didn't come from a science lab. It came from the mind of a philosopher. This is really the secret at the heart of psychoanalysis. So it's time to meet the philosopher who was lurking behind the couch all along, Arthur Schopenhauer. Now, at first glance, this just seems impossible, right? On one hand, you've got Freud, working in the 1890s, a man of science, a doctor who believed in observation. And on the other, you have Schopenhauer, writing his major work way back in 1818, using nothing but pure introspection. I mean, they couldn't seem more different. And yet, here's the kicker. The connection is absolutely undeniable. So many of the ideas we think of as pure Freud, the power of the unconscious, the idea of repression, even the central role of sexual desire, Schopenhauer had already laid them all out in shocking detail, more than 70 years earlier. So, let's dive into the evidence. We're going to start with the two absolute biggest ideas, this concept of the unconscious mind and our own primal desires. Okay, so Schopenhauer's central concept was this thing he called the will. And let's be clear, he didn't mean willpower, like deciding to go to the gym. For him, the will was this massive, cosmic force. It was blind, totally irrational, and just relentlessly pushing every single living thing, plants, animals, and us, towards two goals, survival and reproduction. Now, let's jump over to Freud's office. His clinical version of this was what he called drive theory. He talked about these fundamental, instinctual energies inside us, the big ones, libido and aggression, that are always pushing to be released. Does that sound a little familiar? I mean, the parallel here is just stunning. Schopenhauer flat out said that our reason, our intellect, is just a tool, a servant for the all-powerful will. Fast forward a few decades, and what does Freud say? His famous line, the ego, our conscious self, is not master in its own house. It is the exact same idea. The rational mind is not in the driver's seat. And if you're not convinced, just listen to this quote. From Schopenhauer, from 1818, he is perfectly describing the modern concept of the unconscious. He's saying we think we have good reasons for what we do, but the real motivations are forces we don't even know exist. And this goes even deeper. For Schopenhauer, our conscious thoughts are just justifications we make up after the fact. For Freud, they're often false stories we tell ourselves to hide what we really want. The language is different, sure, one's philosophical, one's clinical, but the insight is exactly the same. We are brilliant at lying to ourselves. And the connection doesn't even stop there. It actually extends to their entire view of the world, a shared vision of what it means to be human that was, well, let's just say it was incredibly pessimistic. Schopenhauer is famous for being history's greatest pessimist for a reason. He basically said that because we are driven by this constant wanting, the will, our lives are guaranteed to be full of suffering. Wanting something is painful, and getting it is just briefly satisfying before you get bored and want something else. That's life, a pendulum swinging back and forth between pain and boredom. So what did Freud find when he listened to his patients day in and day out? Pretty much the same thing. He concluded that happiness isn't really our natural state. In fact, to even function in society, we have to painfully push down, repress, our deepest instincts. This means that internal conflict isn't just possible, it's unavoidable. Which brings us to this incredible insight that both men shared. Civilization doesn't get rid of our suffering. Nope. It just reorganizes it, it channels it into things like anxiety, neuroses, all the discontents of modern life. So all of this just begs a huge question, right? If this intellectual debt is so incredibly obvious, why isn't it common knowledge? And maybe more importantly, why did Freud himself work so hard to downplay any connection to Schopenhauer?
Well, it seems to boil down to three main reasons. First, and this is the big one, Freud desperately wanted psychoanalysis to be seen as a legitimate science. He had to create distance from what he saw as the mere speculation of philosophy. Second, as a medical doctor, he just wasn't comfortable with Schopenhauer's huge metaphysical ideas about reality itself. And third, well, let's be real, tying your brand new therapy to history's biggest downer is probably not the best marketing strategy.
So, what does all this do to our understanding of Freud? Does it make him less of a genius? Not at all. Actually, I think it helps us see what his true genius really was. The key thing to realize is that Freud didn't just invent these core concepts out of thin air while sitting in his office in Vienna. His real, incredible genius was that he was a translator. He took this profound, powerful, but very abstract philosophical vision about what it means to be human, and he translated it into a practical, clinical language. He created a vocabulary of symptoms and defenses and drives that could actually be used to help real people sitting right in front of him. This was the game-changing move. That big cosmic will of the philosopher became the very personal clinical drives of the psychiatrist. And suddenly, this hidden force wasn't just some abstract idea anymore. It was something you could actually observe. You could hear it speaking in a patient's dreams, in their anxieties, even in a slip of the tongue. Freud, in essence, gave Schopenhauer's ghost a voice. And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. If the modern science of the mind began, not in a lab, but in a philosopher's deep pessimism, what does that mean for our search to understand ourselves today? Are we really discovering objective, scientific truths about our brains? Or are we just finding newer, more scientific ways to tell ourselves a very, very old and maybe unsettling story?